welcome back to Skypothesis. After a long break, we are excited to be back and to share with you all a brand new Anniversary Edition build. If you followed our channel for a while, you know that we absolutely love pushing the vanilla game to its limits to create unique roleplay builds. With the release of this new edition, we want to take a break from our normal vanilla seasons to release a few Anniversary Edition builds. We have been having an absolute blast diving into all the great content added with this new edition, and we can't wait to share with you our next build, the Redoran Swordmaster. We take inspiration from all across the world of fantasy to create our characters, and this week's build has been requested since we began the channel. This well-traveled Dunmer is a master of the blade and strongly believes in living a life of honor and in the ethics and virtues of combat. Heavily inspired by fantastical variations of samurai, he has dedicated his life to perfecting his craft and now has traveled to Skyrim where his skills will be put to the test, facing some of the greatest threats Tamriel has ever seen. The young Swordmaster's parents immigrated from Morrowind to High Rock where they worked as farmhands for a few years. When he looks back at this time of life, he remembers only intense poverty and the bitter countenances his parents wore. Their shoulders were heavy with work and they had long since abandoned the dreams of owning their own farm. It would never happen with their salary. The young Dunmer dreamed of winning great piles of gold in the arena and buying his parents an estate of their own, but a 16-year-old farmhand who's never held a sword in his life wouldn't get a second glance. Seeing no other option, he joined the Legion just as the Great War between the Empire and the Aldmeri Dominion was beginning. He discovered a natural talent for fighting, but it was his grit, smarts, and lack of pride that kept him alive. In the thick of battle, he learned to keep a level head and never make a mistake. War had forged him into a true fighter. When the White Gold Concordant was signed, he returned to Daggerfall and easily joined the Fighters Guild this time. There he made a career as a trainer, teaching young recruits the skill of sword fighting. As the years passed, he gained some notoriety, and wealthy applicants would come from all over the country seeking his guidance. Most of these were hot-headed Bretons born with a silver spoon in their mouth. Certainly, they will be the next to claim the title of Arena Champion. You see, there is a certain romance associated with sword fighting. The roar of the crowds, the thrill of battle, and the admiration of fans. And all duelists will have an affair with these at some point, but they never appealed to the Swordmaster. He never forgot the poverty of his youth, nor could he forget watching his comrades die in his arms. He tried his best to pass on his wisdom to these young duelists, but eventually came to realize it was a failed effort. He can teach skill with a blade, but cannot teach the unwritten lessons that only experience brings. One night, he caught his star student inebriated and shouting obscenities in a bar. He had recently been knighted and had just won another arena victory. After confronting his prideful student, he went home with heavy thoughts. The one student he had any hope for had succumbed to pride and the gluttonous spoils of the arena. The Swordmaster realized his time in Daggerfall was over. He had been living too comfortably for too long. Maybe it was old mental battle wounds that never healed, but there was always a restlessness inside him that was never appeased. Now he knew why. His time as a teacher was over, and he left that very night carrying only a few provisions and a sword. He traveled south to Hammerfell, then began making his way east towards Morrowind. So, donning a Redoran hat and plain robes, he sets out on a quest to rediscover his Dunmer heritage. The Swordmaster is ambushed on the border into Skyrim and stripped of what few provisions he had. After a dragon attacks, he picks up one of the fallen Stormcloak soldiers' iron greatswords and fights his way to freedom. As a side note, we never really stopped and thought about how crazy it is that you fight off no less than 11 Stormcloak soldiers, 5 Frostbite spiders, and a bear to escape Helgen. You fight your way through insurmountable odds, so it really isn't a stretch to roleplay already being an accomplished fighter before getting captured. After escaping, it isn't long before he realizes this fresh start is exactly what he needed, a new life and a new purpose. His gameplay made for a satisfying and memorable playthrough. He follows a strict code of ethics and always lives his life to be worthy of respect. He never initiates a fight if he can help it, but if a conflict is necessary, he strikes with intent and does not hold back. He allows his opponents to declare their intentions before engaging in a fight, and often lets them strike first. Whenever possible, he will make sure they can fight on even footing, and he honors fallen opponents who fought nobly, especially non-magic users. Even bandits are worthy of a warrior's death if they fight with honor. There are some special moves here that we'll get to later on that make the melee gameplay more satisfying, but Skyrim is an old game now, but even when it was new, it never had the complexity of a game like Mountain Blade. Advanced sword fighting techniques can be roleplayed, of course, but we like to dive deep into the available mechanics of the game. If you are playing this character effectively, you won't need to tank a lot of damage or block a lot of hits unless outnumbered or backed into a corner. We are using a greatsword, as they have the best ratio of range and attack speed. You can keep enemies just a little bit farther away, but still within your striking distance. When you get the hang of it, you can easily outmaneuver any enemy using a one-handed weapon, and even go toe-to-toe with a frost troll at early levels without taking a single hit. When you are playing effectively, the gap between you and your character is narrowed, and you feel truly immersed in the game. When the Swordmaster learns he is Dragonborn, he does not postpone his pilgrimage to High Hrothgar. He thinks to himself, the teacher has again become the student, and he humbly accepts the Greybeard's counsel. We like to spend a lot of time here meditating with the Greybeards and reading all the books we could find on the divines, the tales of dragons, and the history of the dragon blood itself. He is a pious character and strives to live a morally clean life, as he knows that it's hard to stay worthy of the god's favor when you shed blood for a living. He takes his responsibility as Dragonborn seriously and is easily convinced to help out the Blades. He already knew about them from his time in the Legion, and as a veteran of the Great War, he is also a longtime enemy of the Thalmor. The random ambushes and the infiltration quest are satisfying when you remember the decades-long conflict perpetuated by the Thalmor. Skyhaven Temple makes for a perfect home base for the Redoran Swordmaster. The Eastern aesthetic matches the vibe of a mysterious wanderer perfectly, and the balcony becomes an excellent place to meditate and rest after intense battles. As far as the Blades go, we could not imagine the Redoran Swordmaster killing Parthenax, so we leave that quest day as is, only using the base temple as a hideout and gaining Esbern's blessing before going out to slay a dragon. A short while after his journey begins in Skyrim, the Redoran Swordmaster determines that it's time to re-enlist in the Legion. Ulfric's rebellion must be quelled. While he holds a great deal of respect for the Nords' way of fighting and their strong sense of honor, he understands that a united Skyrim is the Empire's best chance at preventing another war. Re-enlisting in the Legion brings back many fond memories of camaraderie and brotherhood from his younger years. And now, with his skill as a true swordmaster, he single-handedly turns the tide of the Civil War. As he respects honor and tradition that the Stormcloaks are fighting for, killing Ulfric is a difficult decision for him, which he ultimately goes through with for the greater good of the Empire and the world. He would obviously not pursue any evil or morally grey quests, as he is a lawful good character, but there are many side quests in the game that involve helping those in need that you can complete at your discretion. The companions are an option, as he does have a history with the Fighters Guild, but since it's not thematically mandatory, we leave that choice up to you. The Dawnguard and Dragonborn DLCs are a great fit for him as well, as he considers it his duty to protect the innocent and fight for those who cannot fight for themselves. Now let's dig into creating the character. For his weapon, we are using an unenchanted ebony greatsword, which we chose for its sleek design and thin aesthetic. We thought its curved look matched the unique vibe of this character more than any other greatsword. Using an unenchanted blade allows us to use the Elemental Fury Shout, which the Redoran Swordmaster makes frequent use of. For his armor, he will wear the Redoran Guard's helmet, the blue variant of the common clothes, the leather Scout bracers, and Ozidal's boots of waterwalking. The leather Scout bracers perfectly match the shade of blue found on the common robes, and we thought it looked way too cool to pass up. The boots of waterwalking were chosen for the super cool aesthetic of a mystical Redoran samurai walking gracefully across water. If you don't have the Anniversary Edition, the only Creation Club packs you will need are the Ghost of the Tribunal for the clothing and helmet, and alternate armors for the bracers. If you are playing vanilla or on the Switch, my original character just used the Temple Priest robes and chitin heavy helmet and gauntlets. The Anniversary Edition was a good opportunity to dig him out of my old save files and give him a good aesthetic overhaul, although I still think the vanilla version looks pretty cool too. For auxiliary gear, he will wear an Amulet of Frost Resistance and a Ring of Fortify Magicka. These can be swapped out at your discretion. For shouts, he will make frequent use of Elemental Fury, Become Ethereal, Whirlwind Sprint, and Slow Time. There might be occasional uses for other shouts, but this character believes in the virtue of combat and prefers to rely on his skill with a sword. From Alteration, he will use Ebony Flesh and Paralyze. From Restoration, he will just use Fast Healing. He is not a mage or a spellsword. We roleplay him as a pure warrior who has learned a bit of healing magic out of necessity. Alteration spells are imagined as a sort of mind over matter battle toughness that he has gained with age and experience. Paralysis will be important for a special move that we'll get to later on. Moving on to stats and perk spread. We leveled the Swordmaster with a ratio of about 2 health to 1 stamina. It's important to build a solid pool of health as our defenses are fairly lacking. We are instead relying on skillful positioning and manually outmaneuvering enemies. He isn't meant to be tanking damage. You may need to add some perks to Magicka so you have enough to cast Ebony Flesh. To add an extra layer of defense, we are using the Lordstone for that awesome buff to armor and magic resistance. Finally, we are playing as a Dark Elf, mainly for the roleplay, but they do boast a helpful 50% resistance to fire, which is always useful. By the time you hit level 40, you will want the following perks. In Two-Handed, take all 5 in Barbarian, all 3 in Deep Wounds, Champion Stance, Great Critical Charge, Devastating Blow, Sweep, and Warmaster. We rarely take the final perk here, but for this build we want all the melee tools we can get. In Block, take all 5 in Shield Wall, Power Bash, Quick Reflexes, Deadly Bash, and Disarming Bash. In Smithing, take the Steel, Dwarven, Orcish, and Ebony perks. Even though we're not perking higher than Ebony, you'll still benefit from leveling up your smithing skill so you can get legendary level improvements. Remember to also improve the light armor pieces of your outfit. The extra defense does add up. In Alteration, we take the Novice through Expert perks, all 3 in Magic Resistance, Alteration Dual Casting, and Stability. Finally, in Restoration, take the Novice and Apprentice Restoration perks, Regeneration, and Respite. We only use this tree for fast healing, but if you plan to play past level 40, you can definitely get extra utility out of this tree. Higher healing spells and even avoid death would be worth working towards. Additional perks worth picking up are Agent of Mara for extra magic resistance, and Sailor's Repose for a reduction in restoration spell cost. Alright, it's time to move on to our favorite part of every build, the special moves. This is where we like to place the mechanics of Skyrim under a microscope, and find ability combinations that add more depth to your playthrough. As mentioned previously, this game is not Mountain Blade or Kingdom Come Deliverance. So we are digging into other ways we can roleplay more advanced sword fighting techniques. The Swordmaster's first special move is called Riposte, which is the combination of Quick Reflexes and Sweep or Warmaster. When the enemy is initiating a power attack, Quick Reflexes slows time, which opens up a window of opportunity. If you are practicing good spacing, you will have more than enough time to sidestep out of the way and follow up with your own power attack. Depending on the direction you are moving, you will either perform a sweep, which hits all enemies in front of you, or a Warmaster strike, which is harder to land but has a 25% chance to paralyze. Pulling this off takes some practice, and you'll need to pay much closer attention to your spacing and choose your direction according to your surroundings and proximity to the enemy. Another option is to parry, which also uses Quick Reflexes during an enemy's power attack, but we instead use a Power Bash to interrupt and potentially disarm the opponent. Sometimes you just won't have enough time or space to get a riposte in, so you will instead need to settle on a parry. With this move, we imagine he holds his ground and turns his enemy's strength against them. With this in mind, the stagger effect is caused by them putting too much momentum into a failed strike. While they're staggered, follow it up with a standing power attack buffed by Devastating Blow. Up next is Paralyzing Palm, which is slow time and point-blank paralysis. If you cast paralysis close enough, the projectile is never visible. We roleplay this as an unarmed strike focusing on nerve clusters that renders opponents immobile, similar to what Master Oogway does to Tai Lung in Kung Fu Panda. Because of the Swordmaster's battle ethics, he never strikes his opponents again while they're paralyzed. He instead uses this to even the battlefield when outnumbered, so he can fight enemies one-on-one. He learned this move from observing the Khajiit Desert Wind Adept's impressive martial arts abilities. Finally, we have Wrath of the Redoran, which is the combination of Dragon Aspect, Ancestor's Wrath, Elemental Fury, and Ebony Flesh. With this form, he boosts his speed and strength by calling on the blood of his ancestors. Admittedly, the Dunmer racial ability is more for aesthetic flair than usability, but it's fun to imagine the burning skin is a byproduct of the added power. Dragon Aspect boosts your tankiness, melee power, and also reduces the cooldown of other shouts, which allows you to get more usage out of Elemental Fury. And with those special moves completed, we are ready to wrap up the Redoran Swordmaster. The vanilla version of this build has been on the back burner for a long time, and the new outfit added with the Creation Club was just too perfect to pass up. We hope you enjoy playing as a wandering samurai as much as we did, and that you'll stick around for more builds in the future. Thank you for supporting us by watching our channel, and if you haven't already, be sure to like and subscribe to keep the magic of Skyrim alive. We'll see you next time, right here on Skypothesis.